Okay, I want to start this deep dive with a mental image. I want you to visualize something with me.
I'm with you.
It's that classic quintessential image of the ancient world. You know, the one that's probably burned into your brain from every textbook, every documentary you've ever seen.
Desert landscape.
Exactly. You're standing in the desert. The sun is just beating down. The air is hot. It's dry. And right there in front of you, rising out of the sand, are pyramids.
Right. Got it.
But not just one or two. I mean, dozens of them. They're clustered together, sharp angles, really steep sides. It's clearly a royal cemetery of some kind.
It's the postcard image of antiquity, for sure.
It is. Now, here's the question. If I were to ask pretty much anyone on the street, or even, a history buff who's fairly well read, where are we standing right now? What are they going to say?
Oh, it's an automatic reflex. They're going to say Egypt.
100%. They'll say Giza, maybe Saqqara.
Pyramids equal pharaohs, and pharaohs are Egypt. It's like a synonym in our collective consciousness.
Precisely. And that automatic reflex, that cultural instinct, it's wrong.
Completely wrong.
Because in this specific image I'm describing, with these steep, sharp pyramids, we're not in Egypt. We are hundreds of miles south, in modern-day Sudan.
And you're not looking at the Great Pyramid of Giza. You're looking at the royal necropolis of Meroë.
The capital of the Kingdom of Kush.
Which, if you just go by the raw numbers, is the real home of the pyramid.
That's the statistic that just floors me every single time I hear it. The numbers are something like, what is it, over 200 royal pyramids in Sudan.
Yeah, depending on how you're counting the smaller ones or the ones that are, heavily ruined, you're looking at somewhere between 220 and 250.
And in Egypt?
Egypt has maybe around 100, 120 that we know of. So more than double.
The Kingdom of Kush built more than twice as many pyramids as their more famous northern neighbors. And yet, this civilization, a civilization that survived for 3,000 years, is treated like, what, a footnote, a brief chapter in a book about Egypt.
If that. It's often just a sidebar.
And that, right there, is the pyramid paradox that we're going to be tackling today. We've got this massive dossier in front of us. We've got archaeological reports from places like Kerma. We have the actual victory stelae of conquering kings. We even have isotopic data from ancient teeth.
And the mission here isn't just to do the tourism brochure approach. It's not just, hey, look, cool pyramids in another country.
No.
We need to go deeper. We have to understand why this huge gap exists in our collective memory. Why was this incredible civilization so systematically minimized?
Exactly. We want to get at the engine of this empire. We're talking about a state that didn't just, copy Egypt from afar. They conquered Egypt.
Right. They ruled it as the 25th dynasty.
They went head-to-head with the Assyrian war machine, the superpower of the day, and then they fought the Roman Empire to a standstill.
And to really understand how they did all that, you have to first dismantle about a century of really, really bad history. You have to look at the lens through which this kingdom was first discovered by the West.
You have to go back to the scene of the crime, so to speak.
That's a good way to put it.
We need to start there.
Yeah.
We have to talk about the early 20th century and a very influential, very famous, and very problematic archaeologist named George Reisner.
George Reisner.
Yeah.
He's often called the father of American Egyptology, and he is a profoundly complicated figure in this story.
Yeah, reading through the reports, he comes across as this brilliant field technician. I mean, his methods were meticulous for the time.
Absolutely.
But he was simultaneously just completely blinded by the prejudices of his era.
He was a product of his time, and that time was steeped in racial science.
So he goes to this site, Kerma, which we now know was the first capital of Kush. This is around 1913. And what does he find there?
He finds a city. A genuine metropolis. He uncovers this thing called the Western Defufa, which is this massive, solid, mud brick religious monument that looks like absolutely nothing in Egypt. He finds huge defensive fortifications, tons of pottery, incredible artwork. He finds the famous statue of a noblewoman, Lady Senui. The sophistication is undeniable.
And this is where his logic just completely breaks down. He's looking at this incredibly sophisticated architecture. He's looking at this pottery that, get this, is often thinner and more finely made than contemporary Egyptian pottery.
Eggshell thin, some of it. It's beautiful.
And he has a choice to make, right? He's standing there with the evidence in his hands.
He does. He can either admit that the indigenous Black African population of Nubia built this complex urban civilization on their own terms, or he can invent an explanation that fits his pre-existing biases.
And because it's 1913, He is operating under the intellectual framework of the Hamitic hypothesis.
Exactly. And we have to pause on that because it's crucial context. This wasn't just Reisner being a sort of lone bad apple. This was the dominant academically accepted theory of the time.
So what was it exactly?
The Hamitic hypothesis basically argued that true Africans, meaning sub-Saharan dark-skinned Africans, were biologically and culturally incapable of creating high civilization.
Wow.
So the theory dictated that if you found anything impressive in Africa, be it a great kingdom, complex art, advanced architecture, it must have been brought there or founded by a lighter-skinned race, usually some kind of black Caucasian or some group from the Near East.
So it's just pure baked-in racism presented as science.
To put it bluntly, yes.
So Reisner, faced with Kerma, literally invents a story to fit that hypothesis.
He does. He claims Kerma wasn't a Kushite capital at all. He said it must have been an Egyptian trading post, a colonial outpost.
And the Defufa, that unique structure.
That was the governor's fortress in his mind. He went even further in his reports. He described the local Nubians as a, quote, Negroid race who were culturally sterile and primitive.
So he's imagining this little band of civilized Egyptians holding out in a fort surrounded by hostile natives.
It's almost like a script for an old Western movie. The civilized outpost in the midst of savagery.
And the beautiful pottery, the statues.
Oh, that was either imported from Egypt or made by Egyptian artisans who were living there. He argued that the local burials, which showed clear signs of human sacrifice retainers buried with their kings, was proof of their barbarism.
But the tragedy is he was staring at all the evidence that proved him wrong.
He was. The burials themselves were the biggest clue. They were completely un-Egyptian. Bodies were buried on their sides in a flexed position, often on a bed, not mummified and laid out straight in a sarcophagus.
A totally different tradition.
And just the sheer scale of the city, I mean, it was far too large to be a simple trading post, but he twisted every single piece of data to fit his colony theory.
And because he was George Reisner, this towering figure from Harvard, that theory became the accepted truth.
It did. For more than 60 years, that was the story in the textbooks. Kush was just a backwater, a pale imitation of Egypt.
Until the 1970s.
Yeah.
Until a Swiss archaeologist named Charles Bonnet showed up.
Right, Charles Bonnet. He and his team spent decades at Kerma, from the late 70s all the way to the early 2000s, and he essentially systematically took apart Reisner's entire theory.
He re-examined the evidence.
He re-excavated. He proved that the governor's fortress, the Western Defufa, had no living quarters. It was a solid structure. It wasn't a fort, it was a religious temple.
I want to pause on that Defufa for a second because it's such a unique building. If I'm a listener, I'm picturing a pyramid or a typical Egyptian temple with columns, but this is something else entirely.
It is singular. Imagine a solid block of mud brick. I mean, almost completely solid. It's about 18 meters high, so that's like a 5 or 6 story building today.
Wow.
And it has these staircases that wind up through the interior to a flat roof.
So all the ceremonies, all the action happens on top.
Precisely. The idea is that you ascend towards the heavens, towards the gods. Functionally, it's much closer to a Mesopotamian ziggurat or even a Mesoamerican temple than anything you'd find in Egypt.
It's a completely indigenous architectural and religious idea.
Absolutely. And Bonnet found that the ground all around it was packed with offering chapels and workshops. This was a major pilgrimage site. This was the spiritual heart of a kingdom.
And the society that supported this.
Yeah.
You mentioned the scale.
The scale is staggering. The Eastern Cemetery at Kerma has an estimated 40,000 graves.
40,000.
You don't get a cemetery with 40,000 graves arranged in a clear social hierarchy, from simple pits to massive royal tumuli, without a powerful stratified state controlling the region for centuries.
Oh, it couldn't be a temporary outpost.
Impossible.
And this is where we get to the really cool modern CSI stuff that Reisner didn't have. The dossier mentions strontium isotope analysis
Yes.
on the teeth found in those graves. I love this stuff, but walk us through how it actually works. How can a tooth from 4,000 years ago tell you where a person grew up?
It's a brilliant technique. It all comes down to geology and water. Strontium is an element that's naturally found in rocks. And different geological regions have a unique strontium isotope signature, kind of like a chemical fingerprint or a GPS coordinate.
Got it.
As groundwater flows through those rocks, it picks up that specific local signature. That water then gets into the soil, into the plants that grow there, and into the animals that eat those plants. It enters the food chain.
And then into us.
Exactly. When you're a child and your adult tooth enamel is forming, it permanently locks in the strontium signature of the food and water you were consuming at that time.
So your teeth are basically a geological snapshot of your childhood home.
That's a perfect way to put it. Your bones, on the other hand, are constantly remodeling themselves throughout your life. So your bones reflect the geology of where you've been living for the last, say, 7 to 10 years.
So if your tooth signature is different from your bone signature,
You moved, you grew up in one place, and then migrated to another. If they match, you're a local who stayed put.
so what did the teeth at Kerma say? Did they prove Reisner's theory of Egyptian colonists?
They proved the exact opposite. They showed a massive transition over time. In the earliest graves, the strontium signatures were all over the map, highly varied.
Meaning a mobile population.
Exactly. These were pastoralists, cattle herders who were moving with their animals across a wide range of territory. But as the city of Kerma grows and becomes more powerful, the signatures stabilize. They become much more uniform, matching the local geology.
The population settled down.
They became sedentary. They're not just nomads camping out around a holy site anymore. They are citizens of an urban center. They're building a state from the ground up. It proves, without a doubt, that Kerma was an indigenous process of urbanization, not an Egyptian colonial project.
So we've established Kerma was a genuine heavyweight, a real power. But then, as often happens in history, the political winds shift.
They do. Around 1500 BCE, Egypt's new kingdom, this is the great imperial phase of Egypt, the era of pharaohs like Thutmose and Hatshepsut, they get very interested in Nubia's resources.
Specifically the gold.
The gold. Always the gold. They invade. They conquer Kerma. And for the next 400 years or so, Kush is, in fact, an Egyptian colony.
This is the period when you see Abu Simbel being built, you see Egyptian viceroys running the territory.
It's a time of brutal occupation, no doubt, but it's also a period of intense cultural exchange. The Kushite elite start to become very Egyptianized. They adopt Egyptian gods, especially the state god Amun. They learn to write in hieroglyphs. They adopt Egyptian burial customs.
Which sets the stage for one of the greatest reversals in ancient history.
Absolutely.
Around 1070 BCE, the Egyptian New Kingdom collapses under its own weight. There are internal divisions, foreign invasions, Egypt fractures. The colonial administration in Nubia withdraws.
And a massive power vacuum opens up on the Nile.
And into that vacuum, the Kingdom of Kush rises again, reborn from the ashes. But this isn't the Kerma kingdom anymore.
No, this is what we call the Napata period.
Yeah.
The political and spiritual center has moved upstream to the city of Napata, which is near a holy mountain called Gebel Barkal.
Now, this is the part of the story that I find so psychologically fascinating. Because normally, if you have a former colony that gains its independence and then gets strong enough to invade its former colonizer.
The story is usually about revenge.
Exactly. It's, we're coming to burn your cities to
Yeah.
pay you back for centuries of oppression.
Right.
But when the Kushite king Piye, he's the first great conqueror of what will become the 25th dynasty, when he marches north into Egypt around 747 BCE, he doesn't sound like a vengeful foreign invader.
No, he sounds like a religious fundamentalist, a revivalist preacher.
It's a completely different motivation.
To understand Piye, you have to understand what Egypt had become. It was in what historians call the Third Intermediate Period. It was completely fragmented. The north, the Delta region, was ruled by a patchwork of Libyan warlords.
They're not even ethnic Egyptians running the show up there.
No, chiefs of the Ma and Meshwesh tribes who had settled there generations earlier, and they were ruling like secular kings. Meanwhile, Thebes in the south was a semi-autonomous theocracy run by the priests of Amun. The country was in chaos.
And to Piye, looking north from his capital at Napata, this wasn't just political chaos.
It was spiritual chaos. It was sacrilege. The Kushites, who had adopted the worship of Amun during the Egyptian occupation, had held on to it. They saw themselves as the true guardians of the faith. Their holy mountain, Gebel Barkal, was believed to be the southern home of Amun.
So while Egypt is fracturing and becoming more secular, the Kushites have become, in a way, more Catholic than the Pope.
That's a perfect analogy. They see the Libyan rulers in the north as impious usurpers who are neglecting the temples and ignoring the proper rituals. They've abandoned Ma'at.
And Ma'at is that key Egyptian concept of cosmic order, truth, justice, balance.
The way things are supposed to be. So when Piye launches his campaign, he frames it as a holy war. He's not invading Egypt to destroy it. He's invading Egypt to save it from itself.
And we know this directly from his own words, from his victory stela, which is this massive granite slab they found at Gebel Barkal with 159 lines of text detailing the campaign.
It's one of the most remarkable documents from the ancient world. It's so full of personality.
It really is. He scolds the northern rulers. He calls them impious. He says they're eaters of fish, which he considers unclean. He's genuinely disgusted that they're not observing the proper religious rites. He presents himself as the only person left who actually knows how to be a proper pharaoh.
And he proves his piety in this moment, that is. It's just kind of hilarious to us, but it was deadly serious to him. It involves horses.
The horses?
Hmm.
This is the most humanizing detail in the entire dossier.
It's amazing. So Piye is laying siege to the city of Hermopolis. After a long siege, the local ruler, a king named Nimlot, finally surrenders.
Okay.
And Nimlot does the standard thing. He comes out, he brings his wives, he brings his treasury, his jewels, all his wealth to offer as tribute to Piye.
The standard, please don't kill me and burn my city packet.
Exactly. But Piye, according to the Stela, barely gives the treasure a glance. He ignores the wives, he walks straight past all of it and goes to the stables.
He goes to check on the animals.
He goes to check on the horses. And he sees that because of the siege, a siege that he himself caused, mind you, the horses have been starved, they're emaciated, their ribs are showing, and he just loses it.
He's more angry about the animal cruelty than the actual war.
He yells at Nimlot. The Stela quotes him saying, "I swear, as Ra loves me, it is more painful to me that my horses have suffered hunger than any other evil that you have done."
Wow.
And we know this isn't just, propaganda for the inscription, because when archaeologists excavated Piye's own tomb at the cemetery of El Kuru,
What do they find?
they found the bodies of 4 of his favorite war horses buried right next to him, standing up in their full military regalia.
That is a man who is serious about his horses.
It tells you everything about his worldview. He saw himself as a shepherd, a guardian of cosmic order. And that order included the proper treatment of animals. This wasn't just a land grab for him, it was an ideological crusade.
So Piye successfully conquers all of Egypt. But he doesn't actually stay there to rule.
No, he goes back home to Napata. He sets up the administration and then leaves. It's really his successors, his brother Shabaka, and then later kings like Taharqa, who solidify Kushite rule over Egypt.
And this is when we get the Double Kingdom, the 25th dynasty.
Yes. This is this really unique period where a single king is ruling both Kush and Egypt simultaneously, the lord of 2 lands, but in a totally new context.
And they had some very clever strategies for maintaining control. It wasn't just about military force.
No, they're politically very savvy. One of their key moves was controlling the office of the god's wife of Amun.
Okay, what was that?
The god's wife of Amun was the highest-ranking priestess in the cult of Amun at Thebes. It was an incredibly powerful and wealthy position. She controlled the vast temple estates, which were a huge part of the Egyptian economy.
So like a religious CEO.
Essentially, yes. So what Piye and his successors did was they forced the current god's wife to legally adopt one of their own Kushite princesses as her successor.
So they insert their own family member, like Amanirenas I, into the top job.
Exactly. It was a brilliant move. It gave them control over the immense wealth and spiritual authority of the Theban priesthood without having to station a massive army in the holy city. It was soft power, backed up by the threat of hard power.
And then King Shabaka takes it a step further. He moves the administrative capital north to the traditional Egyptian capital of Memphis.
And he begins this official program of what scholars call archaism.
Archaism. It just means copying old stuff, right?
Pretty much. The 25th dynasty kings were acutely aware that they were ethnically outsiders. They were Nubians, not Egyptians. So they compensated by being culturally more Egyptian than the Egyptians. They deliberately copied art, architecture, and writing styles from the Old and Middle Kingdom styles that were already 2,000 years old by their time.
It's like if a modern U.S. president, to prove their patriotism, started dressing in 18th century clothes and only speaking in the language of the Founding Fathers.
That is a perfect analogy. It was a conscious political strategy to signal legitimacy. They were saying, look, we are not foreign invaders. We are the restorers of your ancient traditions, of the Golden Age.
One of the most famous examples of this is the Shabaka stone.
Right. It's this large stone slab that Shabaka had inscribed with a Memphite creation myth. But the inscription itself says that he found the original text on a worm-eaten papyrus scroll and was having it carved in stone to save it from being lost forever.
So he's positioning himself as a great preserver of culture.
Exactly. And for a while, this strategy worked incredibly well. The Nile Valley was unified for the first time in centuries. There was a renaissance of art and architecture. The economy was booming.
But then they run into a wall, a very big, very violent ironclad wall from the east.
Yes. This brings us to the next section of our deep dive, the clash of superpowers. Kush versus Assyria. This is where the story turns tragic.
And the central figure here is King Taharqa. He's probably the most famous of the 25th Dynasty pharaohs.
Taharqa is the high point of the dynasty. He has a long reign, about 26 years. He's the greatest builder of his line. If you go to the Great Temple of Karnak in Luxor today, that one massive, towering column that stands alone in the first court, that's all that's left of a huge kiosk that Taharqa built.
And his building projects weren't just in Egypt. His name, his cartouches, have been found all the way south in Kush, at sites like Denjail.
Right, which shows the massive north-south extent of this empire he was ruling. It was huge, but he made a geopolitical miscalculation, a fatal one.
He started meddling in the Levant.
He did. He tried to support the small kingdoms in Judea and Phoenicia in their rebellions against the Assyrian Empire.
He wanted a buffer zone.
He wanted a buffer zone.
Yeah.
It makes sense from a strategic perspective, but the Neo-Assyrian Empire under kings like Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal it was something new in the world. It was the first true military machine of the Iron Age.
We really need to explain the technological gap here. The Kushite Egyptian army was still fundamentally a Bronze Age army.
It was a very effective one. They had chariots, skilled archers, bronze-tipped spears, but they were operating at the peak of an older way of war.
And the Assyrians?
The Assyrians had mass-produced iron weapons, which were harder and held a better edge. They had developed heavy cavalry that could smash through infantry lines in a way chariots couldn't. They had siege engineers who could undermine and batter down city walls.
And they used terror as a deliberate state policy.
They did. Their inscriptions are full of gleeful descriptions of flaying enemies alive and creating pyramids of skulls. They were brutal, and they wanted everyone to know it.
So when Esarhaddon, the Assyrian king, finally gets fed up with Taharqa's meddling and marches on Egypt in 671 BCE, it's not a fair fight.
It's a slaughter. The Assyrians just roll over the Kushite defenses. They push Taharqa's army back. They reach Memphis, the capital, and they sack it.
And the Assyrian records of this are they're chilling. They don't just say, we won. They give you an inventory.
They list the loot, the number of captives, everything. And this is where the story gets incredibly personal and tragic for Taharqa.
He manages to escape the sack of Memphis.
He does. He flees south, back towards Nubia, but he has to leave his family behind.
And the Assyrians capture them.
They capture his queen, his concubines, and his son and heir, the crown prince Ushankuru. And we have an Assyrian victory stela, the Stela of Esarhaddon, that depicts this.
It's a horrifying image.
It is. It shows the massive figure of Esarhaddon, and he's holding two much smaller figures on leashes, like dogs. The leashes are attached to hooks that go through their lips.
And one of those figures is the Kushite crown prince.
Yes. They were dragged back to Nineveh in triumph, completely humiliated.
You can't even imagine what that would do to a father, to a king.
Well, we don't have to entirely imagine it. We actually have a text from Taharqa, a prayer to the god Amun that he composed after this disaster. And in it, the propaganda mask just completely slips away.
What does he say?
He's not the mighty pharaoh anymore. He's just a heartbroken father. He's begging Amun, "Oh, Amun, my good father, do not abandon me. Save my children. Let them live." It's incredibly raw and human. It's the voice of a man who has lost everything to this terrifying new enemy.
And the Assyrians don't stop there. They come back.
Esarhaddon's successor, Ashurbanipal, comes back and pushes even further south, sacking Thebes. Eventually, the Kushites are driven out of Egypt for good. The 25th dynasty comes to an end.
And in most standard history books, this is where the story of Kush effectively ends. The chapter is titled The Black Pharaohs. It ends with the Assyrian invasion, and then the book moves on.
Which is a huge, huge mistake, because the Kingdom of Kush doesn't end, not by a long shot. It simply evolves. It pulls back, it consolidates, and it reinvents itself for a new era.
It moves south.
It moves south. This brings us to the Meroitic period. Around 300 BCE, the center of gravity for the kingdom shifts away from Napata and moves much further up the Nile to the city of Meroë.
So why the move? Was it just about getting further away from the Egyptians and their powerful northern neighbors?
That was definitely part of it. Strategic depth. Meroë is much harder to invade from Egypt, but the primary drivers were probably economic and environmental.
Geography is destiny.
It really is. Meroë is located in a region between the 5th and 6th cataracts of the Nile. It's sometimes called the island of Meroe because it's this fertile land bounded by the main Nile River and the Atbara River.
Okay.
But the crucial difference is that this region is far enough south to be inside Africa's summer rainfall belt.
Ah, so they aren't totally dependent on the Nile flood like the Egyptians were.
Exactly. In Egypt, if the annual inundation fails, you have famine. In Meroë, you have rain-fed agriculture. You can grow different crops like sorghum and millet. It gives you a much more stable food supply.
And rain means more vegetation.
It means trees, specifically acacia forests.
And trees mean fuel.
And fuel means industry. This is where we get into the Iron Age of Kush. For a very long time, Meroë was given this nickname, the Birmingham of Africa.
After the industrial city in England.
Right. The theory was that Meroë is this massive, smoke-belching industrial center churning out huge quantities of iron and spreading that technology across the African continent.
But the dossier here suggests we need to update that view a little bit. It points to the work of an archaeologist named Jane Humphreys on the slag heaps.
Yes. Slag is the glassy waste material that's left over when you smelt iron ore. And there are enormous mounds of it at Meroë, which is what led to the Birmingham idea in the first place.
Well, what did her research find?
By carefully excavating and dating the layers within these slag heaps, she discovered that the iron production wasn't continuous, it was episodic.
So it wasn't a factory running 204/7.
No. It seems to have happened in intense bursts. Maybe it was seasonal, or maybe it was tied to specific events, like preparing for a major military campaign or a big religious festival. The surprising thing she found was that most of the waste dated to either very early in the city's history or very late after the peak of the kingdom.
So the idea of a constant industrial revolution that powered the empire might be wrong.
It's more complex than that. They certainly had iron. They had iron weapon spears, arrowheads, and iron tools like hoes for farming. It gave them a major technological advantage. But there was a long-term cost.
Deforestation.
To smelt iron, you need to create charcoal. And to make charcoal, you have to burn enormous quantities of wood. It's a very strong possibility that the Meroitic iron industry led to severe environmental degradation around the capital.
They may have literally burned through the resources that allow their civilization to thrive.
It's a pattern we see again and again in history.
The other great innovation from the Meroitic period was intellectual. They created their own writing system.
Yes, the Meroitic script. They moved away from using Egyptian hieroglyphs and developed their own unique alphabet.
And it's one of the great puzzles of the ancient world.
It really is. It's technically an alphasyllabary, so some signs represent single consonant or vowel sounds, and others represent full syllables. It has a formal hieroglyphic form and a much more common cursive script that looks very elegant.
But there's a huge catch.
There is. We've deciphered it, but we haven't translated it.
What's the difference?
It's what I call the German newspaper problem. Imagine you don't speak a word of German, but you know the Latin alphabet. You could pick up a newspaper in Berlin and you could sound out the words. You could read, Die Bundeskanzlerin hat eine Rede gehalten. You can make the sounds.
But you have no idea what it means.
You have no idea what the sentences mean. That's where we are with Meroitic. We can read the names of kings and queens like Natakamani and Amanitor. We can identify the names of gods that they borrowed from Egypt like Isis and Amun. We've figured out the sound values.
But the grammar, the verbs, the adjectives, the actual meaning of the sentences,
It's almost entirely a mystery. We are desperately missing our Meroitic Rosetta Stone, a bilingual text that has the same inscription in Meroitic and another known language, like Greek or Egyptian.
it's tragic, really. It means there are thousands of texts from this civilization, funerary inscriptions, temple dedications, administrative records sitting in museums, and they're silent.
It is a library where all the lights are turned off. We can see the spines of the books, but we can't read the pages.
But even with the lights off, we can still make out the big shapes of their history.
Huh.
And the biggest, most dramatic shape in the Meroitic period is a massive war with the greatest superpower of them all.
Yes. This is one of my absolute favorite stories in all of ancient history. Section 5, the One-Eyed Queen versus the Roman Empire.
It sounds like a Hollywood movie title.
It really should be a movie. So set the scene. The year is about 25 BCE. Rome, now under its first emperor Augustus, has just conquered Egypt. Mark Antony and Cleopatra are dead.
And the Roman legions are the new power on the Nile.
And they start pushing south, testing the borders, maybe looking to expand their new province.
And who is ruling Kush at this time?
A queen. Or more specifically, a candidate.
Candake. That's the Meroitic title, right?
It's the title for a ruling queen or a powerful queen mother. It's actually where the name Candace in the New Testament comes from.
And this specific Candake was a woman named Amanirenas.
Amanirenas. And we have a description of her from the Greek geographer Strabo, who was writing not long after these events. He calls her a masculine sort of woman, and crucially notes that she was blind in one eye.
A one-eyed warrior queen. So when the Romans start making aggressive moves on her southern border, she doesn't wait for them to invade.
No, she does something incredibly bold. While the main Roman governor of Egypt is away on a campaign in Arabia, she launches a massive preemptive strike.
She attacks first.
She leads her army north into Roman-controlled territory. They storm the city of Syene, which is modern Aswan, and overwhelm the Roman garrisons there and at other frontier posts. They take prisoners, they take loot, and they take trophies.
And one trophy in particular has become legendary.
The bronze head of Emperor Augustus.
Wow.
You have to understand, all over the newly conquered province of Egypt, the Romans had erected these larger-than-life statues of Augustus to symbolize his power and demand loyalty.
It's a symbol of Roman domination.
Exactly. The Kushites tore one of these statues down, broke off the head, and carried it all the way back south to Meroë, a journey of hundreds of miles.
Now, normally, if you capture the enemy leader's statue, you might put the head on a spike or display it in your palace. Look what we did.
Right.
But Amanirenas did something far more clever and far more insulting.
She did. This was a masterclass in symbolic warfare and disrespect. She had the bronze head taken to a temple in her capital city, and she had it buried under the steps at the entrance.
Under the steps. Why there?
So that every single person who entered that temple to pray for victory for the rest of time would literally be stepping on the face of the Roman emperor.
They were ritually, symbolically, trampling their enemy underfoot with every single prayer.
It's the ultimate act of humiliation. And the most amazing part of the story is that we have the proof.
They found it.
In 1910, the British archaeologist John Garstang was excavating at Meroë, and right there, buried under the threshold of a temple, he found this magnificent, perfectly preserved bronze head of Augustus. It's in the British Museum today. The archaeology confirms Strabo's story perfectly.
So, needless to say, Augustus is not happy about this.
Rome does not take this kind of insult lying down. A new Roman prefect, Petronius, is sent with a massive army, something like 10,000 men.
And they counterattack.
They do. They march south with a vengeance. They push the Kushite army back, and they even sack the old capital of Napata. It's a brutal back-and-forth war that drags on for years. Both sides take very heavy losses.
But this is where the story takes a shocking turn. It doesn't end with Kush being conquered and turned into a Roman province. It ends with a peace treaty.
The Treaty of Samos in 21 BCE. And this is the part that historians for a long time just kind of glossed over because it didn't fit the narrative of inevitable Roman victory.
Because a Roman peace treaty usually meant one thing.
It meant you surrender, you become a client state, and you pay tribute. That was the Pax Romana. Submit or be destroyed.
But not this time.
Not this time. Meroitic ambassadors travel all the way to the island of Samos in the Aegean to negotiate with Emperor Augustus himself. And Augustus grants them terms that are, frankly, unbelievable.
What were they?
He agrees to withdraw the Roman border back north. He gives up the territory that Petronius had conquered. He grants the Kingdom of Kush an exemption from paying any tribute to Rome. And he basically recognizes them as a sovereign, independent power.
Why? Why would the all-powerful Augustus, the master of the world, essentially fold to an African queen?
It was a cold, hard military and economic calculation. He realized that conquering Kush would be a nightmare. The supply lines were too long, the climate was too harsh, and the Kushites under Amanirenas were just too fierce. It would cost more in legions and resources than the territory was worth.
She had made the price of victory too high for Rome.
She fought the Roman Empire to a draw and won the peace. It was an incredible diplomatic and military victory.
And that peace held, right?
It did. For almost 300 years, Rome and Meroë traded. They had diplomatic relations, but Rome never again seriously tried to conquer Kush. Amanirenas had set the border.
It's an incredible story. So we've covered the wars, the kings, the queens, the pyramids. But let's talk about the foundation of it all. How did this kingdom pay for everything?
One word, really. Gold.
Gold.
The name Nubia itself is thought by many linguists to come from the ancient Egyptian word NBW, which literally means gold. This region was the primary gold mine for the entire ancient Mediterranean world.
They were supplying Egypt for centuries.
Supplying Egypt and later supplying Rome through trade. We found archaeological evidence for industrial-scale gold processing with dozens of grinding stones dating all the way back to the Kerma period. This was the source of their wealth and their power.
So they had the gold, and they also had the muscle. They were known as the land of the bow.
Yes, Tasseti. That was one of the oldest Egyptian names for the land of Nubia. The Kushites were legendary archers. Their bows were distinct, long, powerful, made from palm wood. They were feared throughout the Nile Valley.
In fact, for centuries before they conquered Egypt, they were actually hired by the Egyptians.
As elite mercenaries, the Medjay, the famous police force of pharaonic Egypt, were originally Nubian archers. They were the special forces of their day.
It's interesting how their military skill was always respected, even while their ability to create a civilization was being denied by people like Reisner.
It is.
Which brings us to a final, sort of sensitive but really important topic to address. The label itself, the Black Pharaohs.
Right. It's a term that is, it's a double-edged sword.
How so?
Well, on the one hand, the term Black Pharaohs has been incredibly effective and important for popularizing this history. It pushes back directly against the old racist narratives of Reisner and his contemporaries. It reclaims these kings as definitively African and challenges the traditional whitewashing of ancient history.
It's a powerful corrective.
It is. But on the other hand, it can inadvertently reinforce the very bias it's trying to fight.
Oh.
By adding the qualifier black, it subtly implies that the default pharaoh is non-black. It frames the 25th dynasty as an exception, an anomaly, something other.
Right. It frames them as outsiders who were just, cosplaying as Egyptians for a while.
Precisely. And the reality, as we've discussed, was so much more nuanced than that. They weren't just occupiers. This was the double kingdom. They were culturally integrated, they were devout worshippers of Amun, but they were also very proudly, ethnically, and culturally distinct.
They showed that distinction visually, right, in their art. If I look at a statue of Taharqa, does he just look like any other Egyptian pharaoh?
He looks like a pharaoh, but with very specific and deliberate Kushite markers. They maintain their own distinct regalia. For example, their crown. Egyptian pharaohs wore various crowns, like the famous Nemes headdress. The Kushite kings almost always wore a tight-fitting cap crown, sometimes with ribbons down the back.
But the most important detail is on the forehead.
The uraeus, the cobra.
The symbol of pharaonic power.
In Egypt, the pharaoh wore a single uraeus cobra on his brow, symbolizing the goddess Wadjet and his dominion over Lower Egypt. The Kushite kings of the 25th dynasty wore a double uraeus, two cobras side by side.
Two cobras, why two?
One cobra for Egypt and one cobra for Kush.
It's a visual statement of their dual sovereignty.
It's a political manifesto carved in stone. They weren't hiding their Kushite identity at all. They were fusing it with the traditional office of the pharaoh. They were saying, I am the lord of the two lands, Egypt and Kush, in a way that no one before me has ever been.
It's just fascinating. They were navigating complex issues of identity politics 2,700 years ago.
With incredible sophistication.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's try to bring it all together. We started with this pyramid paradox, the fact that the civilization that built the most pyramids is the one that history almost forgot.
And I think what we've seen is that Kush was never just a footnote to Egyptian history. It wasn't a primitive colony that had a brief moment of glory. It was a true rival. It was a conqueror. It was a resilient and distinct civilization with its own architecture, like the Defufa, its own unique language, its own industry.
And a military that could hold off the two greatest empires of the ancient world, Assyria and Rome.
It's a story of incredible resilience. From the destruction of Kerma, they rose again at Napata. When they were driven from Egypt, they reinvented themselves at Meroë. They just kept adapting.
And they left behind this legacy that we are still, to this day, trudging to fully understand.
That's the thing that really sticks with me, the Meroitic script.
The library with the lights off.
Exactly. We have these thousands of texts, inscriptions on temple walls, funerary stele, offering tables. There might be history, poetry, literature locked away in them. They were just sitting there, silent.
We can pronounce the words, but we can't hear the story.
Not yet. And that brings me to the provocative final thought I want to leave everyone with. If, or more likely, when Meroitic is finally fully translated, how much of our understanding of classical history will we have to rewrite?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, our entire history of this part of the world is written from the outside looking in. We rely on Greek and Roman authors like Herodotus and Strabo and Pliny. We see Kush through their eyes, through their biases, through their tropes about barbarians and exotic kingdoms.
We only have one side of the conversation.
We only have one side. Imagine, just for a second, what it would be like to read Queen Amanirenas' account of her war against Augustus, in her own words. Imagine reading a Meroitic history of the 25th dynasty's conquest of Egypt from their perspective. Imagine reading about their trade with India, their internal politics, their religion.
The voice of the other side of the frontier.
There are entire histories, entire worldviews locked away in those texts that we simply cannot access yet. And when we finally can, I suspect the history of the ancient world is going to look very, very different. It won't be a Roman monologue anymore. It's going to be a dialogue.
That is a thrilling and genuinely exciting thought. The history isn't over. It's just waiting to be read.
Couldn't have said it better.
Thank you so much for taking us on this journey. It's been an incredible deep dive.
The pleasure was all mine. Always happy to explore the archives.
And all of you listening, keep asking questions. Keep digging deeper. We'll see you on the next deep dive.